All right, we are live.
We are.
Live from Bogota, Colombia,
Yes, you are
uh,
here.
next to Parque El Virrey.
Yeah.
So, listen, so I'm with Julie Prieto. Julie, as many of you will know, Julie is the manager of Social 19, and meaning that you do all the behind the scenes stuff for the class.
Yeah, yeah. The administrative stuff
Yeah,
it creates on it. The not fun part
yeah.
of that, but still fun.
It means that Julie does all of the interactions with students. And by the way, if you are a student in Social 19 and you are watching this,
Mm.
we're going to say this again in another 3 or 4 minutes, but you are watching the wrong video. You should be watching the video that was sent to you.
Yeah.
It's called
Only 2%.
Only
It's
2%.
about extremism.
Yeah, it's about extremism, so you will watch that. We'll come back and remind you of that. But we thought, hey, let's do a stream anyway so the students in the class are watching a different video from last semester. But we thought, let's have a conversation. Here we are in Colombia, a country that, was at war for 50 years.
Yeah. We say that we were like in war, but actually we're still in that post-conflict
Yeah, yeah,
era that it's still feels like war at some point.
yeah.
Mm.
So in certain regions
Certain
here.
regions, yeah, correct.
So, okay, so you were more active war and now you are, but you're a nation that has lived through violence for a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah.
And we thought, well, we were going to do some things in the street,
Hmm.
interviews with people, but then we thought, you know what, let's just be right here in our apartment and have a conversation
Yeah.
then. First thing,
I add something?
yep. And by the way, I should add, so Julie and I are here, and Laurie is here, Dr. Mulvey, and she is off camera, but she's watching the chat or taking questions from the stream that she will ask, and also she's going to ask some questions. But we just thought it was easier to not have her on the actual live stream.
Mhm.
And so you were putting the frame of war and post-conflict on the table because of what is happening.
Just when
So
you're talking.
you're putting war on the table right now because of what's happening internationally in the Middle East. But also another piece of this conversation in Colombia is about the Americas.
Yeah.
Because that has also, that framing has come into our world also within the past couple weeks. So
Mhm.
I think both of those things are valuable to talk about.
Okay. Yep. I like that. I think there's so much to talk about, but let me ask you, and I know there'll be some questions on the
Mhm.
stream about the conflict in the Middle East
Mhm.
and the war. I mean, it's quite violent. I mean, I can't just call it conflict. But I also want to add that on Tuesday, next week, we're on spring break. But the following week on Tuesday, I'm going to have a whole class where I just answer questions from the class and from the live stream about this particular conflict and war. So we're not avoiding it, but it's just we're here. It's a different thing. So how about you growing up? Like what's your first memory of war here in Colombia?
Mhm. Well, I feel that like in the 90s, maybe.
Hmm. So how old were you?
Um, I was born in 1982,
Uh-huh.
so maybe like late 80s, starting the 90s, when we hear about bombs
Yeah.
in the city.
Yeah.
Like we had like two big things, like actually nearby here, like in near El Parque de la 93,
Uh-huh.
which is like
Uh-huh.
from like few blocks from
Uh-huh.
here. A big car exploded. It was several things, and also in the department we call here, it's a former like the security department of Colombia.
Hmm.
It was called DAS,
Hmm.
Departamento Administrativo de Seguridad. And also they put like a car, like, and it was so bad. But that time I remember my family being worried about like, where's your dad? Where's your aunt? Where's like our relatives?
Mhm.
Just to check in because in that time you didn't have cell phones,
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
say I'm safe. So yeah, I remember that, and I remember that that was scary, but it was just something that happened here. Like
Yeah.
it was not like a, it was disruptive, of course, but it was not something really that you couldn't live without that.
Yeah.
That happened like in the city. I was born in Bogota,
Mm.
and you can say that the conflict in Colombia also has like many different views, but if you have to put them like in separated in like categories, you will say like rural areas
Uh-huh.
will see the conflict different, and in urban areas we will see the conflict also different.
You know, I just to say, my first memory was also around the same time. I took a course in graduate school on Colombia and Venezuela in 1987. And so I was really digging into the conflict here. And then later, I remember the one bombing at the security offices, right? That
Yeah,
one I remember,
that
reading about.
was huge.
It was a big thing.
Yeah, it was a big
that
thing.
was a major.
And also I wanted to add something because this conflict in Colombia is made of different elements.
Uh-huh.
It's not just about guerrilla against the government.
Uh-huh.
It's like day by day and time. What I remember was specifically things about the narco traffic.
Yeah.
Like I didn't remember kind of an ideology conflict or left against like the right of the government or so. I remember the narcos doing that. Like it was
Yeah.
around narco traffic.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And I don't know if you feel that you just answered this, but the question from Axel from Germany, he was asking what were the key things that started the civil war in Colombia. So I don't know if you feel like you kind of started to answer it, but from your perspective.
Well, of course.
And this is your study of sociology.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Like, of course, I know things because I've been studying that thing, not just because I'm a sociologist, but because I'm interested in. But I have to say that I'm also not like the voice for every Colombian in this country. I'm not the voice for the academic part or the old sociologist here. It's just a piece of how I see this and how I'm just sharing my own experience. But it started like almost a century ago, because inequity in the country, because like in the 1930s or so, there was so much wealthy concentrated just in a group of people, like nothing different, right? like now in different countries as well. So some of them felt like campesinos or people living in the rural areas, they felt that it was unfair. Like they didn't have anything. And like the disproportion of the difference between one and another was huge. So they started like claiming that, and the political power of that time was a conservative power, let's say, like just to put that in ideology frames. And yeah, so it started like the poorest people in the country, they tried just to claim some rights and so, and then the power tried to just put them down. And it was when everything started, but it's fair to say that the conflict has been evolving in different ways and different shapes of conflict. And along the years, we have been trying to make peace, but at the end, I think we haven't been able to learn how to live with conflict and how to address that part, because we are so focused in ending conflict, ending war, and starting peace. And that's so complicated.
And that's the how Laurie and I ended up down here in Colombia, because we were invited down to give some talks about the post-conflict era here in Colombia, and about some of just the work that we do and the things that are going to need to happen here. And then, together we did some things with the Truth Commission here in Colombia with you and Renata and Laurie and I. You know, when I think about the origin of the conflict or the war, I take back to my studies of Latin America and the latifundias, you know, the big, you know, the Spanish, they conquered you know, they take over the continent, the Americas, and they just start dividing up land for whoever the colonial masters were who ruled certain areas, and they divided up land to other people who could pay for it coming over from Spain.
Yeah.
And then these big tracts of land, and then the indigenous peoples became the laborers for that land. They all got kicked off the land. The slave trade was far more active here in South America than in North America. So you had slave labor, you had indigenous labor, and then people left with very little. And you don't really understand, you said it, right? But people don't understand how unequal things have been here, that a very small number of people would control 90 to 95% of the wealth. Still,
Until these days, like in a different dimension of life, like not just about like land in the countryside, which it's happening, of course, but also in the streets, also like in education, in access to certain services. I don't know, like it's still.
Yeah, and you think it, and you know, I mean, this is the inequality that we really have a difficult time talking about, because always the people with more power control the means of communication, and so they're going to shape the conversation. This sounds like a really leftist perspective, but it's actually not. It's a perspective that even people who are conservative, who are anywhere on the political spectrum, will understand that, of course, the means of communication are owned by certain small numbers of people, and they're going to shape the conversation. So, you know.
Question.
All right, we have another question from the stream.
So it's Ed from South America.
Okay, Ed.
And so he wants to know just something about the relationships between the countries around Colombia during this time that you've been talking about.
So have you studied the relationship with Colombia and Venezuela and Colombia and Ecuador?
No. Like not beyond that project of the Gran Colombia made by Simon Bolivar.
So I had this course where we studied Venezuela and we studied Colombia, right? And we kind of looked at them side by side and the person I studied with was a scholar of the region, right? And the differences were only scholarly differences, right? The key sociological pieces, structures were the same, you know, that in Venezuela and in Colombia and in Ecuador and go down to the Andes in Peru and wherever you want to go. The key idea is that a small number of people controlled the means of production, and they controlled the land and they controlled the resources. Like in Bolivia, the owners of the mines, right? Like the tin mines, are like small numbers of people. And then the military was created and used to ensure that those small numbers of rich people held on to all the power. And the United States began trading with the Americas, and then we needed to ensure that we had access to the resources that we wanted to have access to. So here in Colombia, right, you had your president in the early 20th century that started nationalizing things. I forget which one it was, but the moment you start nationalizing things, that means the people in Colombia are the owners of what is their land anyway. And then the rich people here, the elites that are profiting off of that and selling it now to Europe and the US, that becomes a problem for them. So this is what you were saying about, well, then people start looking around and rising up and saying, this is like, we can't have this. Like, you know, we're workers here. We need to band together and unite against these power interests.
And it also happened like with the influence along the time of other different events happening around the world. Like what was happening like in Cuba, what happened like late, like in the 70s, all the revolutions that we had in the around the world, but also especially here in Latin
Yeah.
America
Yeah.
against dictatorships, and so that also shaped that like feeling, that need of being just claiming what was like,
What was theirs?
yeah.
If you really study the history of Cuba and you understand what happened throughout the 20th century, the first part of the 20th century until Castro, they finally took over, succeeded in 1959. But if you study Cuba before that and you look at the immiseration of the vast majority of people in Cuba, then you see it's not difficult to understand why there was a revolution and why these revolutionaries like Che Guevara and Castro and all of them were fighting up in the what was it, the Sierra Madre? So yeah, but why they were fighting against the government. I mean, this would be like it would happen in the United States. Well, it's what happened in the Revolutionary War in the United States. The British demanded more and more taxation, more and more resources, gave less power to the colonialists who were here, didn't allow them to mobilize, to have their own political parties and political groups, and one thing after another kept taking more and more and more, and eventually we had a revolution in the United States. Well, that's why there was a revolution in Cuba or in Nicaragua. And yeah, it's really, you study that.
Yeah, and I feel like a key point to understand this thing that we're saying, and because you mentioned that it might sound like a left, like ideology live stream or so, is because the entire history has been told from just one side, from the side of who gets the power. So the other side, which is what we are just trying to share about what people felt like in the ground, in the rural areas or so, that's definitely like the left part. But how about if the history will have been told from that part,
from people on the bottom,
like that would be a different narrative.
They talk about the elites who are dominating them, you know, like for example, we look at, okay, we're bombing in the Middle East right now, right? Iran. And well, you know, like poor countries aren't bombing, you know, like you have to have the resources to bomb, and then you use that to your advantage. Yes, we have another question.
Question from Oregon. Person's name Chewbacca.
Chewbacca.
I know Chewbacca from the live chat. Almost every class. I know.
To what degree has the U.S. and the CIA molded current Colombian government and social structures?
Oh man. So here's the thing, right? I'm going to do a critique. Look, the other thing you just said, I really like how you said this. The thing, we're both sociologizing. We're not doing politics here, right? We're doing sociology. Like it was only a matter of time before the American colonists were going to rise up against the British, because the British just wanted more, and then they had their foot on the necks of the colonists, and the is it colonialists or colonists? Colonialists, right? The people of the early Americas, they eventually are going to want freedom. So that's true across all over the world. It's been true throughout history. So we're doing sociology here, not like politics, right? But the problem in the US, you know, if you say something about, listen, well, let's understand why it is that Castro succeeded in Cuba. It doesn't explain why Castro became an autocrat, right? That's a whole separate story, and that's not justifying that at all. But the question is, why did Castro fight? First off, why did people eventually support him, and why did he win, and why did the revolution succeed in Cuba? And then again, the revolution turned to a very authoritarian direction. But the fact is, that's a separate conversation right here. So the CIA, the United States, I'm going to say some things, and I want you to say first off, you say, what did you learn about the United States military and CIA here operating in Colombia when you were younger? Do you remember, like when you were in college and studying these things?
I mean, not being a sociologist, maybe nothing. Like if you ask like a regular citizen or so, maybe nothing. But just being in the matters of trying to make sense of stuff, first thing that comes to mind is the Operación Cóndor,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is like trying to put this big fear of communism in the region,
Yeah.
just help military dictatorships in certain countries of Latin America, mostly all Latin American
All of
countries.
Latin America. Listen, Argentina, Brazil,
But not-
Colombia, Paraguay, Uruguay.
It's like
Colombia, not so much.
yeah, not so much
But
actually.
Chile,
Chile,
right?
yeah.
And Ecuador for a time, Peru.
Yeah.
It was,
And later like Nicaragua,
yeah,
Panama,
yeah.
and so yeah, it's the Operación Condor, which still has like remains certain things talking about just like ideologies
Yeah.
in the region.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we can just translate those 70s years, like the decade of the 70s,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
exactly in how we have this reality here, because for sure might be influences still, but not in that way.
Yeah, yeah.
It's different. I think it's different.
So here, when you think about Operación Condor, here's an idea. Naturally, we understand the Monroe Doctrine was the doctrine that said, hey, listen, the Americas, once we deal with Spain and once we deal with Portugal and France and the UK, this is about the Americas. This is the space for the United States to control. This is our land. So you all can kind of be active here in different ways, but we control this. And once I think Americans don't have an understanding, the average American does not have an understanding of the ways historically in which the US government has played direct roles here in these nations to make decisions about how resources would be distributed. So there were no governments in power here in the Americas that were anti-US. And if there were, when someone got elected, some populist here, then the United States, and naturally, and the populist would be, hey, let's nationalize the oil, as in, say, like Venezuela, or let's nationalize the tin mines. Like in Bolivia, people fought, the miners fought for decades, fought with the government and with soldiers, and soldiers that in the end were armed by the United States because this tin was going to the US, and we didn't want the workers to take over. We don't know what's going to happen to the tin. Maybe they don't sell it to us after that. Maybe they sell it to the Chinese. Well, it wouldn't have been the Chinese at that time.
No.
But maybe they just raised the price extraordinarily high. And then like OPEC with oil in the 1970s. And so we don't want that. And so the US just played direct roles, and then the CIA's role would be to go in and start to undermine things, like foment discord, assassinate candidates, do all sorts of nefarious actions,
So supporting riots and supporting guerrillas. Like there's a lot of, I mean, I know someone who supports like revolution, and so might say like, no, Julie, you're saying like the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of literature and also reports and so that back up the fact that the CAI supports also like rebellions here in the region, just to keep the region destabilized. How do you say that?
Keep it. Yeah. So the US would play both sides.
Yeah,
We would
both
support,
sides.
we would support right-wing guerrilla groups. We would support left-wing guerrilla groups who would seem like they would be against our interests because they're left-wing, they're populist, they're working from below. But we're just always dissent and discord and uncertainty. That benefits.
Yeah. And that was not, how can I say that, like revealed to the population.
Yeah, no,
that was
nobody
just
talks
because
about
you
that.
were in the matter of studying that and you were curious and in this like kind of humanities and liberal stuff. But if you have this conversation with the person who is not like interested in that part of the history, that might be just like, no. Like
Yeah, they
it
don't, you
never
wouldn't
happened.
know.
'Cause-
No, it's like the Epstein files,
yeah.
right? You can say these Epstein files are, people, you don't know
Mhm,
until you dig in. And if the files aren't released
mhm,
and someone tells you, hey, there's this guy Epstein and he's connected to all these rich politicians and sports figures and financial figures and all sorts of celebrities and he's connected to them and all these really terrible things that they were doing with young
mhm,
girls, not to
mhm,
mention so many other things. So,
mm,
come on,
mhm.
that's not
Yeah, it's not possible.
it's not possible.
Yeah.
But here it is. And so that's what we know about Operation Condor and we know about the CIA.
Mhm,
Now we see that they were very engaged. And
mhm.
so to the benefit of the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
There is a question from Jeff and Kenji, but I'm gonna hold it for a second.
Okay.
But the question.
If you can just come closer to them, unless Jeff says they can
Okay.
hear you, but go ahead. Just sit.
Okay, so Jeff and Kenji's question is gonna be about the countries of, how they relate in a different way, but first, can you just say what people, I know you're talking as sociologists, but what are the parts that somebody else would be listening who isn't on the left and would say you're missing these other factors that were happening here in South America or the Americas?
Okay, I got
if
it.
any?
I got
Mhm.
one. Yep. Well, one is that, hey, listen, for whatever reason, there's a certain group of people. Each country got stratified.
Mhm.
You got the people at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom. Of course, here in the middle was very small. So the top, it sort of goes like, normally it's kind of like that, but here it's like this, and
Mhm.
then really wide at the bottom. Well, eventually, as happens in every social system everywhere in the world, some group of people rise into positions of power,
Mhm.
either because other people gave them the power, or they got lucky, or who knows what. And then they take control. And when they take control, they want to keep control. This is the
Mhm.
nature of it, right? This is how human beings operate.
Mhm.
We don't, I have my house. I lock my house.
Mhm.
It's my house now. And maybe it was built on somebody else's land 100 years ago, but now it's my house and I put locks on the doors and that's just how it is.
Mhm.
And I support people around me. I support my own family. I support my neighbors. I support my friends. But that's just the nature of how this is. And if someone comes along and says, hey, but you know what? You really need to let people live in your house because we have homeless people. And
Mhm.
I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Well, that's the same way things happen here in South America. So if someone from a very different ideological or political perspective might say like, yeah, well, that's just the way it is. And you can expect them then to want to
Mhm.
hold on to power, whether it's oil in Venezuela or tin or copper or anything, they're going to hold on to power.
Mhm.
Well, okay, that's how life is. That's how it works. And the United States became this dominant country in the Western Hemisphere. And the United States only became dominant by dominating.
Mhm.
You have to dominate. It's not just because you work twice as hard. There's a history of different. I mean, some of it is that, some of it is that people came to the US from all over the world and we created this really awesome culture and people came together and they developed their new ideas and all sorts of really cool stuff. But some of it is domination.
Mhm.
And so, well, why wouldn't the US look out for its own interests?
Mhm.
Like, of course it's going to do that.
Mhm.
Like that's the job of a country. Look
Mhm.
out for your citizens. And if it means going to war with, like right now, the president, the administration in the United States decides to bomb Iran because they say, listen, you're doing all these things that we don't like, the support for terrorism, the support for different groups, and you're trying to we think you're trying to you say nuclear energy, we say you're going to get weapons grade uranium, you're going to make it. So, okay, we're going to stop you. And
Mhm.
it's our interest. So we're going to stop you. Israel says the same thing. Other countries say the same thing. So that's the nature of life in a
Mhm.
way. Like, okay, so you can see it that way. Does that answer your question?
I feel like, you're in the realm of something, but you're answering so in other words, people have resources and they want to keep them, and people don't have them and they want to get them, and that's going to be the end.
That's life.
But there wasn't any specific political or just sociological factors that you're saying, other than resources. Who has
It's
the
fundamentally resources in politics. Yeah.
Would you add anything to it?
I'm thinking like maybe two things. It is resources, but it's still power. Like
Just power.
because it's not only about like having stuff. Sometimes it's just like imposing like your view or your way of seeing things. And if you have the power to do that, that things becomes easier. Let's say like just the power for
Yeah.
me is just not it's resources, but it's also the power to control those resources or to access to those
Yeah.
resources. Like in the example of you were saying, like if in this country, for example, the current government is from the left ideology, and they were supposed to not having anything, but now they have the power, and now they have people from their own community or own close relationships in power, like
Yeah.
in certain
Yeah.
institutions,
Yeah.
departments. So now maybe they don't have the same resources as the previous governments that we can say they were from the right or right extreme or whatever, but
Yeah.
still right. They don't have those resources, so their followers, we suppose or we assume, they also don't have enough resources, but now they have the power, and that
Yeah.
changed the entire spectrum.
Yeah.
And I also think that maybe there's another element, and is so this is a question that I've been thinking from our last night conversation about what we talk about, and is how difficult is to separate ourselves as citizens from the government. Like,
Yeah.
okay, the government is taking certain decisions in the name of millions of people.
Yeah.
And then you can't you might be a supporter of that government, but you easily can be against certain decisions.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you vote or not for that person or for that government, but it's so difficult to separate yourself from that. So it's like a citizen is having like a dual
That's cool.
situation.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I like that. Wait, I want to say one thing real quick. By the way, if you're currently enrolled in social entertaining, you're watching us, you're watching the wrong video.
Yeah.
You need to go back to that email that we sent and
You
click on
will
that link,
fail the quiz.
which is okay.
So-
Yeah.
Just a quick clarifying question, and then I want to go to Kenji and Jeff's question. And then there's another one that came in. So does Colombia have a similar class system to the US? That's also from Axel.
No,
No, that's
No,
an
no.
interesting question.
the elites here, the elites are smaller in that. You say it. Yeah, you say it. You're the Colombian.
This is, I'm expert in being Colombian, just that, just
Yeah.
being a Colombian. That's a really interesting question because like I can exactly like the moment when some government decided to classify people in stratos, which is
Yeah.
like levels, and it was like with intentions to assign resources or to get taxes from certain level of incomes. So they classified people in strato, let's say like class. I know initially it was like level, but with the time it became like class.
Yeah.
So 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 6 and 5 being the higher, 4 and 3 kind of the middle class, and 2 and 1 like the poorest people like in that classification. It was like to know who has more income so I can get more taxes and give to the lower levels. But by the time it became classes, so now you can be living in a class 6 area and not having employment.
Yeah.
And maybe get your incomes from your sister who is living in Spain and is sending you euros. So you're able to afford that. but you, let's say, just sort of an example, but you were not born in that class, so people around you will know that even if you have the resources, you're not belonging to that part. So here we are so class divided, not just because of level of incomes, but now it has a lot of elements around, like even your skin color, I will say, like, which is a topic that is not too much
Not discussed here very much.
not at all. Not at all. But if you ask people in Cali or in regions when we have more like Black communities or
Yeah.
indigenous communities, they definitely have that conversation in
Yeah.
their daily lives. But yeah, it's totally, it's not 3 classes, it's
Yeah.
6 classes
6 classes.
grouped in 2 classes each, but still, if you're filling out a form for applying for school, they ask you, which is your estrato? Like, what's your
Which
level?
number are you?
Which number? And you will say 3, 4, like, and you're always trying to have this social mobilization.
You're trying to go up.
Go up,
Wait,
yeah.
they still do that? Ask which class you're in?
My
If-
school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like here. So when you're filling out a form for
Yeah.
something,
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
still ask, like, hey,
Yeah,
what?
they ask you. Sometimes you need to send a copy of a bill, like the electricity bill or so,
Oh,
just to
yeah.
prove that you're not telling us the different.
Damn.
Yeah.
Which class am I in here?
Here you might be in this department 6 or 5, but I will say 6 because of your neighbors. You know what I mean?
Oh, so it's not us. It's the neighbors. It's
Yeah.
other people around. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay, so this goes back to Jeff and Angie. Just kind of wanting to know about other South American countries or just the countries of South America in general. Like,
Yeah.
what can they do to help each other, or do they create coalitions?
Yeah, there are a lot of coalitions here in South America,
Mhm.
but at the same time, there's a lot of competition between countries. I mean, it's just like in Europe, right? There's like the EU, so here we have the same thing in South America, as the European Union. But the nations in the EU are they work together in some ways, but they're also very much competing with one another in every other way. So here in South America, that is happening. In the US, we sort of group them all together and imagine that, like, well, the Venezuelans support the Ecuadorians, who support the Peruvians, who support the Brazilians, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
Really.
And also we of course we share a lot of things in Latin America, of course, in South America, let's say, but still we're so different
Yeah.
among each different countries. Like, that's why I really don't want to be called Latina, because that's just a definition from the language perspective.
Yeah.
Because from Mexico, except Brazil, but until Chile, we speak Spanish. Well, mostly because we have other countries speaking
Yeah.
French and Dutch
And other
yeah,
indigenous languages.
indigenous
Yeah.
languages. Yeah, I was missing that. But primarily Spanish.
Yeah.
Just defining an entire part of the continent by the way they speak and putting them a label as
Yeah.
Latino is like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
If I have a conversation with a Chilean, if we are in the same room,
Yeah.
and you start asking us things and the way we speak, and so you will see immediately, like, no.
This would, the equivalent is really like in Europe. And between, you talk to Italians and have the Italians have conversations with the Irish and other conversations with the Germans. And the languages are different, but even for people who can speak a common language, let's say English, their cultures are so very different.
Yeah.
And that's true here, is what you're.
And yet
Yeah.
we share a lot of things, of course. That
Yeah,
like
but in Ecuador is really different than Colombia. Where I lived in the mountains of Ecuador, it is not like, so many areas of Colombia. It's an Andean, it's a different indigenous peoples. It's a different, the Andean spirit. And
Can you
feels
both
different.
say more about that? Because I know it's like what do you mean? Like if someone thought you were Venezuelan or Ecuadorian or Peruvian, like, but you're like, no, I'm Colombian. What is the?
Mm. And I will add another ingredient to that, and it's like you can't say Colombian because inside Colombian we have like many different ways of seeing things. But I feel that as countries or as nations, we are always trying to find something that define us, like collectively. Sadly or not, sometimes here is football is like the
No, this is
energy of
why football is so important around the world, because it gives us meaning to very disparate people, right? So anybody can wear the Colombian football jersey.
Yeah.
And you feel an immediate connection.
Yeah.
Even though you're at some plaza watching the World Cup, and the people around you may have very little in common with them, because maybe they're from the countryside or from the south or the north.
Yeah.
But still you have some way in which you can connect.
Yeah, but at it that I get that, but at some point it's kind of not enough. Like you cannot define a country because they're passionate about football. It's like there's many other things. I feel like to answer Laurie's question is like the way we eat, not just what we eat, but the way we eat, the way we greet each other. Like here, for example, in Colombia, we kiss like in the cheek, like we hug, but maybe in other regions it's different. They just like give your hand. People say that los Bogotanians, we are very cold and not friendly at all as other parts of the country. And you can say like, no, we are. You see that? You see that?
I would say people here are very distant. Certain distant. I mean, we're not obviously, but I feel it. I watch. It's when we were at dinner last night, and we're just walking through the area. I mean, there's like a feel here. I don't want to say Latino feel, but there's an energy here that I know I'm in South America.
Yeah, you know that.
I know I'm in a certain part of South America, but it's different from where I lived in Ecuador. Very different. And it's as different as the United States in Ohio is with Mexico. The difference, I think about where I grew up in Ohio, and I think about being in Mexico, I go to Mexico City, and I think, wow, there's really different. Well, so is being in Bogota and then being in Cuenca.
And also being in this part of Bogota, and if you go south, do you remember when we were like 3 years ago in Transme? We start speaking with that man who just shared about his life and everything, his job and so and so. We could easily just say goodbye by a hug or whatever.
Easily.
It's
Very
like
different.
Different than this part, because this part is class 6
This
or
is
5.
class 6, and so if we take you outside to go around the park and stuff. Now it wouldn't be. This isn't like the the upper east side of Manhattan, but it's nice. I mean, it's very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have another question? I hope we answered that. That's complicated.
Yeah, it is complicated. But although I wonder, Julie, what do you want to be? You don't want to be referred to as Latina. You explain why, but not Colombiana. You explain why. I mean, we all have the like, you're not seeing me with those labels. Is there a way you want to be understood or referred to?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends when who I need to be in certain circumstances, like filling up a form to enter the United States. I would prefer to say Hispanic.
Wait, to say what?
Hispanic.
Hispanic, okay.
Because if it's a matter of language, but if you're asking me, for example, my ethnicity or something like related to my race or so, I would rather be mestiza than Latina, because I don't feel Latina is something that defines my ethnicity at all.
Mestiza meaning mixed.
Mixed, but mixed by Spanish, indigenous, and Black. So that mix is primarily what we have here in Colombia.
So a lot of people don't really understand that Hispanic is not a racial category.
Yeah, it's not.
It's a sociological category. Hispanics are people who are the original indigenous peoples of the land, the Europeans who came over via
From
Spain and the
Spain.
UK and Portugal, and then the Africans, Afro-Colombians or Afro
No, the Africans came through slavery
through
here.
slavery, yeah, um,
Then we have Afro-Colombians
and
here.
Afro-Colombian here.
And we all have this mix, like
Yeah.
not just the skin color, not just race, but also like culture, the way of speaking and so. But of course, if I'm visiting Portugal, I will be Colombiana because I'm from Colombia. Like, is I feel like defining a person by their nationality, it's a little bit tricky
It's
and
it's very
unfair.
tricky. Yeah, yeah,
At
yeah.
the same
Just like
point.
this is what we're doing in the United States all the time, right? That we, people, that's why people like to separate a little.
Mhm.
Well, but I'm Italian. I'm Italian American, or I'm
Mhm.
American Italian, or because my Italian side is so important to me that if
Mhm.
I just say, hey, I'm an American, well, I'm wrapping myself in the same flag that all these other people from all over the world
Mhm.
are wrapping themselves in, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I have this part of me, this Italian culture part of me. So you have this mestiza Colombian
Mhm.
side of you. It's a similar thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why it's really fun that I really enjoy these kinds of conversations. And
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, and Hispanic, by the way, is of Spain, right? So it's like Spanish speaking peoples around the world outside of Spain, we
Mhm.
say Hispanic.
And we also have Brazil with a similar but totally different history
Yeah,
because they like have this heritage from Portugal,
yeah.
and they also have like slavery for a long time. They
Much
have
longer.
indigenous, much longer, yeah,
Yeah,
and indigenous communities, of course, that still are located like up north in
yeah,
the
yeah,
country.
yeah.
Um, there's still a lot of migration from Japan. You know, like they have a
Yeah,
big, huge migration from Japan.
yeah,
They have also German migration.
yeah.
So it's like it's even more mixed than
It's so
Colombia.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
if you go up north Colombia, you have Arabs
yeah,
coming
yeah,
from different parts of the Middle East. So
yeah,
we have last names here.
yeah.
Like doesn't sound
No,
doesn't
same
sound
the Bucaram, and so you have
Mhm.
Okay, do we have another question?
Another question from Stephen from England. Has there been any improvement on cracking down on the drug cartels in Colombia?
Oh man. The problem is we just sent a couple articles back and
Mhm.
forth on this, right?
Mm.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Mm. I kept thinking that it's been changing over the time,
Yeah.
and the power has been just passed to other groups,
And groups in other
in
countries.
other countries, and maybe it was not that recognized, sadly recognized as when Pablo Escobar
Yeah.
and that part. But improvement, I don't know. If you say that catching these tons of cocaine in the airports or in the ships or that stuff that the police has to do, you will say yes, at least they get that. But the structure, the power structure of those organizations, they're enterprises. I mean,
And
this
the
is
and
very
yeah,
hard,
with so much power and so much money and
even than a government.
yeah, no, that's why so many politicians, so many
Mhm.
police, they're involved. Like in Mexico, we think like, okay, let's just find all the cartels and
Mhm.
let's get rid of them. Well, but listen, the police in Mexico, if you're a police officer and you're making, like $500 or $600 a month
Mhm.
US, maybe 800
Mhm.
now, or maybe 1,000, let's say. And the cartel comes along and says, listen, when you hear X, Y, or Z, we want you to tell us and we'll pay you $1,000 a month. So you double your salary. Like you're
Mhm.
going to be on the take with them.
Mhm.
And then if you're a politician and they're offering you millions of dollars, then you're going to do that. It's so difficult.
And here's like another like critique to the system itself, but this war against drugs like has been primarily from the United States. It's also something that doesn't have like good results. Like it's like going against the groups,
Yeah.
kill them, catch their drugs, and then they have another one who is second in power. So
Yeah.
do it again, do it again, do it again. So something needs to change like internationally about the policy
Yeah.
against narco traffic and consumption and all of that, because it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all internationally, there's people are being paid off everywhere in ports all over the world, and it's so
It's also a way to control the hemisphere.
Yeah.
Because it's like I have the money
Yeah.
to give you to get rid of those cartels on drugs. So if you're not with me, I'm not giving you enough money to do
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
that can be directly or through international cooperation in
That's
projects.
here in Colombia
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how far the current administration here in Colombia is left, the Petro government, and but the cartel money, the money coming to support the military and support other things is like, yeah, it's still coming from the U.S.
Yeah.
You still will have to do the things that we need you to do. Anyway, we have another question.
I have a question first. And because with what you're talking about, what is the mood here, and what are people saying about the boats that have been blown up
Off the coast of Venezuela and
like, what are people
Colombia.
saying that that's about? Because I don't know that even in the United States we have much of an idea. What are people here saying?
Honestly, I don't know. I feel like that's more like a media stuff. Like we can maybe ask like a journalist or like a morning show in a radio or so, and they have like a point of view. But I haven't seen like people randomly in the streets talking about it. Like I can have a position, and so my mom can have a position, my husband can have a position from what they get from the media, but I don't see that this is like a regular conversation, at least from my close circle. But for example, of those boats were full of fishermen.
Yeah.
That some of them were Colombians as well. So maybe if we have this conversation up north in, excuse me, in the Atlántico department and in Barranquilla or so, maybe they will have like a strong position or at least something to say about it, because it was one of them who was killed
pretty
there.
clearly. I mean, in the investigations that I saw, very clearly, these are not all narco traffickers. There were a lot of fishermen who were killed.
And also just to make it clear, talking about narco traffic is always difficult because it's something that you can make sense of that.
Yeah.
At some point you got it. At some point you understand what they killed those like big jefes of the narco cartels also. But at some point when it's so like inside the society and the economy of the country, have to say like this non integrated in the system money that comes from the narco traffic at some point supports our economy. I mean, I'm saying this like with a risk.
But it's it's so much money. Of course, it supports different things, and you know, like, but here they say, listen, the problem is the consumers. Stop the consumption here, and then there won't be anybody growing and shipping and selling. So it's very complicated, you know.
Absolutely.
And now that narcos, when I lived in Ecuador, there was no trafficking in any way, shape, or form. You couldn't find cocaine I mean, it was there, you know, among the rich, but like this was not part of life. But the narcos moved into Ecuador and all along the Pacific coast, especially around Guayaquil. And so it's terrible
Mhm.
right now there. So
Mhm.
anyway, do you have another question?
This is Stephen and Jeff. Does Colombia have a drug consumption issue or more of a trafficking issue?
Yeah, yeah, we have a drug consumption issue, of course.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I don't have like information exactly by type of drugs or so, or population, or I don't have those stats
Yeah.
in my mind. But yes, it's an issue, especially because when you stop the cartels for exporting the drugs to other countries, they need to sell it,
Yeah, they gotta sell some.
yeah, somewhere.
So they push it just like in
Yeah.
the United States. They push it mostly into poor communities.
Yeah, inside, and
Yeah.
is when we started to use this language of micro traffic, like micro
Yeah.
tráfico.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
we used to talk about the narcotráfico, like
Yeah.
the big thing outside. But then when it became a problem here, it's like micro
Microtráfico.
tráfico, which
Los
is like,
microtraficantes,
yeah,
so like local dealers.
yeah.
And we see, in here, marijuana is decriminalized, so you can't smoke it.
At some point, at some amount,
Yeah.
like you cannot be like with
Yeah,
a kilo.
lots and lots. But yeah, it's easy to go to markets here, go anywhere. People will sell cookies and brownies and things that you can eat, but not,
Mm.
but you don't smell it very much here.
Mhm.
Sometimes walking through the parks, but in some areas, I'm sure you smell it a
In
lot.
some areas, yeah.
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 Okay, another question?
I have one, it's back to, I think what you were talking about more with culture. This is Nick's, so he's saying, is the term native, or maybe indigenous, accurate if the original people came across a land bridge? How long does a group need to live somewhere to be considered native?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, yeah. The
Mm.
native people, like nobody's native. I mean, the land, let's just assume that the story of the
Mhm.
population of the Americas, right? So let's go back like, 30,
Mhm.
16 to 20,000. We don't really know, actually. It's starting to be a question, but before anybody populates this land, there's nobody here, and then people come. And like who, at what point, but then more people come, right? And they come from different directions. Who's native and who isn't? Yeah.
I guess my facilitator mindset just activated the question like, but what is to be native? Like let's just try to define like, is you were born in some place, then I'm Colombian native, like because I was born here. But it is related to the ownership of land or a culture, specific culture of a tribe, or what are we talking about when we say native?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like nowadays I understand like Native Americans, for example, that put my mind in a specific group of people.
Yeah.
Um,
And here you say los indígena.
Indígenas.
Yeah, we say indigenous, but most people in the US don't use that word. We use American Indians or Native Americans. En aquí, ¿qué usa? Aparte de
Indígenas.
indígena.
No, los indígenas.
Yeah.
Sí. Indigenous communities that they were like the initial owners of the land
Yeah.
before the Spanish came. But I'm also trying to remember how they called in Australia. Aborigine. Los
Yeah.
aborígenes. The aboriginals.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a different definition. So maybe it's just a matter of language
Yeah.
that we need to try to define what is the meaning for us
Yeah.
about being native, and then we start like thinking in property rights,
Yeah.
ownership, like culture, like I mean, it's not just one dimension of that.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
No, I was gonna just offer one part of the indigenous.
Yeah, go
that I
ahead.
think is just to see what the two of you think.
Maybe just sit on the edge of the sofa so we hear you.
When I think of indigenous people, I think of people who are of the land.
Yeah.
So not only, not about birth, I'm just born on the land, but people who are of it, who the land is part of the culture. the natural world is part of their
Mhm.
culture, and so, and their cosmology, land.
Mhm.
So I don't know what you
I like
two
that.
think about
I like
that.
that. That's cool. I like that. I think we would do well to also include that into the way we think about some things.
Mhm.
What does Julie think?
Hey, what do you think about that?
I still feel that we are defining indigenous, but I'm not sure what to do with the word native, like where to place native. Like, so it is the same thing to say that you're indigenous or you're native, because maybe this territory where I was born shaped the way I live and my relationship with my world, but I'm not like in the same way connected as an indigenous person. But can I be still a native person from Bogota? Like, yeah, I don't know. I would like to dig more.
Yeah.
Hey, I do have a question about the current war in Iran and around Iran. What have you had any conversations with Colombians about?
Rather than my husband
How
and
how
Ricardo,
about the media? What are you hearing in the media here in Colombia?
I think so far they are just like reporting what's
Okay.
going on, like
Uh-huh.
saying. Um, it's interesting because I no my only conversations and with mom some of like things like are happening, but just like not like analyzing or like thinking like deeper on that.
Uh-huh.
No, not really. But yesterday we were having lunch, and in the next table, uh, we listened like four international experts defining what's wrong and what's right about that. And that was funny because
They
we
were
were,
Colombians?
yeah, Colombian.
Yeah.
And for sure there were not like internationalists or so, they
Yeah,
were
yeah,
just
yeah.
like random citizens, I don't know their works or so, but they were like saying with so much confidence,
Confianza.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
confidence on themselves,
Confidence,
like,
yeah.
this is what happens, what da da da, or I couldn't retain the entire information, but they were so sure what they were saying, like
Yeah.
that was wrong. Yes, but Iran did so and so. I was asking to myself, like, how they know, how do they get that
Yeah.
confidence to say something? But it's like the only thing that I've heard. I haven't heard that conversation with other people rather than Ricardo. And getting from the social media, not social media, but media news or so, is just reporting.
Yeah, reporting. Yeah.
Also, I have to say I'm not too much into the news. So
Right now.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not like reading stuff every
Yeah.
day and so.
No, same here. We're following, but we left the United States on early Saturday morning. And so,
When
we
everything started, it
yeah,
was
when everything started. So we were in the lounge at the Turkish Air Lounge, actually. That's where we were, and we were watching 6 different television screens.
what was people's reaction?
Just it was just people were just yeah, nobody yeah, there's nothing, people just watching. People were tuned in though, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we were going to spend, and by the way, I'm in a week, 2 weeks from today, I'll be doing a class on the war in class. So
Mhm.
right now, we're here in in Colombia, the next couple of days, and then we will um, be on spring break next week, so
Mhm.
there are no classes, and then we will go from there. So
Here's another question
a question.
from my XO. I'm sure I'm not
Yes,
saying
to
it
my
right.
EXO, whatever that is. Yeah.
Do Colombians separate the US government from its people?
Ah, there you go. I talked about this last week, remember, in class when we did the class in Iran.
Mhm.
And how well can I answer this
Filipino.
question before you do?
Yeah.
I find that I was surprised. So I spent so much time in Latin America, here in this region in the first part of my career. And when I started traveling in the Middle East, and also a lot of time in Europe, right? When I started traveling in the Middle East, as I said in class that day, I heard Arabs in particular, Arab Muslims especially, saying, there's a difference between you and your government. You're fine. I like you. You're an American, but your government, yeah, I got a lot of problems with your government, right? And I was so shocked by that because I was so used to being here and people not making a distinction at all. They would be like, yeah, you're an American. We really hate your government. But then they would just start jabbing at me. And I'm like, wait, you say you like me. You don't like my government. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. So that was my experience all over Latin America, is that you all don't make a very good distinction.
Yeah, I have to say maybe not. Yeah. Okay, not to put my example as a case, but of course, because I work with you and I know my colleagues and I know like everyone around world in conversation, so I'm able to understand that. And maybe many people can say that, but like in the general population, I will say like no. And yeah, we still maybe just see the country as a thing that of course is like over there. And just like people who live there, like is that group of people just doing stuff over there.
Estadounidense, right? The United Statesian or the
Sí,
gringos.
we can say
Yeah.
mostly you will hear los gringos,
Yeah.
but of estadounidenses or norteamericanos, but not Americanos at all, because that's not like that's a concept that we also embrace ourselves, like
That you're
we all
son Americanos.
American.
Yeah, we're all Americans.
Yeah.
But so this idea of making this distinction between our government and us when we're walking through the streets or something. Yeah, once again, people they hold something here has been my experience throughout my life.
Yeah.
But again, that wasn't true. And at first I didn't believe, I remember talking, I think I was in the West Bank. I think I was in the West Bank in Palestine. Maybe I was in the Arab quarters of East Jerusalem, and talking to Arabs. And they made that distinction. I just didn't believe them at all. And like, come on, there's no way you of all people don't feel some kind of way about me, not just my government, but me also. Here I am walking freely, doing my thing. But no, it just was so clear that no, we don't. You're fine. You're not, maybe that's an Arab thing, like given that region and the nature of governments and how they're different,
And also their relationship with the United States is different than the relationship that we can have here in Colombia with the United States. Like it's not the same way that we approach an American citizen as the way maybe people in the Middle East just see you. It's different. It's different, But you can be sure we mostly never call you American. That's one thing. And I say we with the risk of not being we, just me seeing that. But
Do people use the term gringo here?
Yeah.
Because I ask people a lot and they're like, no, whatever. Or sometimes I refer to myself as a gringo and people don't engage with me.
They're being polite.
Okay.
With you. Because that's like official definition. It's kind of a slang. I don't know. Like
it's slang, It's not so negative. I mean, you can use it in a negative way.
I think it was used like in a negative way. So maybe when they say like, oh no, they want to show you respect or so. Like I also use something with you.
Yeah. No, no, I use it a lot here when I'm here, but I don't. For me, it's just that.
Because I know that you will be okay with that. You understand that. But maybe some other random.
Listen, increasingly, I think probably growing numbers of Americans have no idea of the history of that term. or that it's used in a pejorative way
Mhm.
toward North Americans. And do you associate it more with white Americans or
Yes.
just all Americans?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my case in Mexico. That was something that I experienced. It was more
Mhm.
kind of white people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Mhm.
Lori Lynn?
There's another question.
All right, let's go.
First of all, Jeff clarified, I think it was a typo when he sent it, the person was just Amy XO. So that was.
Just Amy. Okay.
Okay, so Stephen asked, how long have you, Julie, been working with Sam? What's something you learned or experienced that has made a positive impact on your life?
Oh, damn. I got one. There's like a big carton. Wait, Lori, can you just grab that right on the chair right there?
Oh,
Yeah. This is a really, I'll tell you how Sam makes a positive impact on Julie.
I mean, it is positive or not. I mean, up to you, Steve.
Right here. This is it.
I got 3.
Yeah.
From the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time when I come, I bring Blue Moon.
Nice.
Because it's Julie's favorite beer.
Yeah, and they don't sell it here in Colombia.
Yeah, no, nowhere. Yeah, I've looked for it. You've looked for it everywhere. Even today, I was at a store and there was a whole wall of beer. And I just said, hang on, let me just look because someday they're going to sell it here. But no Blue Moon.
I'm gonna sell it.
Yeah, okay, you become the importer.
We're gonna start the business.
Okay, how about anything else?
Sam, and what is something you
Mhm.
learned or experienced that made a positive impact?
Wow. Many things, Sam, many things. But I guess like seeing sociology from a totally different perspective that I learned when I was studying,
Mm.
it was like a curtain, like
Ah,
I can use that. And it also started with whirling conversation. I have this like vivid moment in Penn State, like 2018. So, but the way we met each other in 2017, but I think I start working with you guys in 2020 by the pandemic, like working as a
yeah,
staff member.
yeah.
A meeting that I joined with you, Laurie, and Brenton, and I guess it was Michelle or maybe Sarah. I can't exactly remember, and Sheffy, I guess.
Mhm.
And you guys start talking about sociological addresses, which is like the keystone of the method of our work with
The term
dialogue.
is sociological address. It's a concept that Laurie developed that really it's just game changing concept. Yeah.
And I remember like that moment of like, what? Wait, wait. Like if I got my diploma, I'm a sociologist, but suddenly all that I knew,
Yeah.
it was like, no. I
Yeah.
mean, it's totally different. And then seeing it with you in class,
Yeah.
applying it, like getting the knowledge from the students, like just having fun being a sociologist,
Yeah.
it just make me proud of being a sociologist. Never, I stopped hiding my career, like from
Ah.
spaces.
No, because here a sociologist is kind of it's viewed very much to the left. Most sociologists very much a la izquierda. Son izquierdistas, the
Sí.
leftists, and it's seen that way.
Yeah.
And so the radical
Yeah.
sociologist, so it's very pejorative
Yeah.
to many people.
Yeah. And my career was developed like more like in the private sector and corporations and so as an international cooperation. So it was kind of a thing saying that I was a sociologist. But after that, it was like, not anymore. I'm a social
That's
science.
cool.
So yeah.
And go ahead. Yeah.
No, just many little details about the way you see the world and the way you approach different uh, just like daily processes like in an Excel about
Yeah.
class or
Yeah.
so like I'm learning every time from you. I'm
Yeah.
learning every time. That's
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah, thanks for that question. That's very
And so you took over the Social 19 the class, the management of the class, maybe in 2020 or 2021, maybe.
Like between 21 and 22 or
Yeah.
so. Around 22 maybe.
Yeah,
we will
and
say
now
22.
it's just in. I talk to Julie more. We only talk in Spanish, so it gives my Spanish has improved immensely.
A lot,
Well,
I have to say.
yeah, so we talk every day. I mean, every day we're just constantly messaging
And
and
laughing.
talking and laughing. Yeah, we laugh
That
about a
is
lot
a
of
really
things.
cool thing. Like,
You have to laugh because the stuff that come, it's just
Julie is very funny.
you're very
And
funny.
so are
Yeah.
Canadian.
Yeah.
I hear you laughing all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, we laugh a lot.
yeah.
It's been a big joy. And also you're just super responsible, my God. Uh, as a Virgo. And yeah,
Ascendant is
yeah,
not.
yeah,
Blue moon.
yeah.
Okay.
All right.
A couple more.
Okay, a couple questions, yeah.
Kind of like nice questions. Just a comment from Logan from class who said, why have such a cool office hours when I need to be watching the class videos?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Logan, you didn't watch the video.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can go back and watch this one, actually. This will be recorded too,
So
so.
then Amy asked, how is the nightlife in Colombia? Is it safe for a young woman, especially a solo tourist? Any tips
Ah,
for women wanting to travel to Latin America solo?
Yeah, no, it's not like, I mean, there are like two components of the question. Like, how's nightlife? It's pretty active in
it's
Bogota.
happening.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
happening. We are not like a 24 hours open city, but we are a late city. Like we have plenty of restaurants and bars, and so I will say like you can go by yourself, like partying or with friends or so, but the key things is like going back home by yourself. So my first tip is like you'd never take a taxi cab in the streets. You use like those apps, or you go with your friend and then take a Uber or whatever thing from their home or so. Like you need to take certain like strategies
Precaution.
and precautions.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's not safe. Like
You
it's
know-
not safe even if you're in groups.
But listen, but you say that, right? But okay, don't take a taxi from the street, but how often does somebody get a taxi out from the curb like this
Mhm.
at night? In the day, it's different, right?
Yeah.
Although there would be many people who say, oh, never get a taxi on the street. And so my question though is, how often is there a problem?
Well, based on the news, it's quite a problem, and you can see cases that
Okay, but this is a city of 10 million people. Okay, 8 million people.
maybe in proportion,
Yeah.
is not that big, but you always want to take the precaution, like not expose yourself on that,
Yeah.
because you know that things can happen, you know?
Okay. But like last night, we walked back from the restaurant.
Oh, but it's really close. We are
Okay.
the four of us. We had two men with two women.
Yeah.
So it's different. But her question was like a girl by
Yeah,
herself.
yeah.
Like I won't do that even in a safe area. Like I will take more my precautions.
Yeah.
But because you're asking about Bogota, it's like you can do that, but you would like to make sure that you have safe things around that just help you just
Yeah.
take your drinks, for example, and being safe at home.
It's also really a lot of fun I mean, Bogota is different than Cali and Cartagena and so on, and Medellin. But there's not like a single area of Bogota that's like the party neighborhood.
No, we
Right?
have plenty
There's
different.
different ones. Yeah.
And again, this is like linked where with what we said before. It's not just one type of party. Like
Yeah.
you have different types of parties depending of if you're high class or not high class,
Yeah.
but class 6.
No, this is like in Iran, in Tehran, the same thing, we talked about, like with that video, that short video we
Yeah,
showed.
yeah, yeah.
Whew, man.
You have different options, and
Yeah.
of course, if never had happened to you before, you feel more confident to go outside and do what you want to do. But once something happens to you, you start like being more precautious
Yeah,
of
yeah.
on
I
stuff.
think that's
And
by the way, if you do come here, there's a spot, Parque El Virrey, Virrey, and there's this hotel called Cite Hotel, Cite. It's a it's just a really nice spot. And
Hmm.
from here you can go in a lot of different directions. And anyway, keep that in mind.
Hmm.
Who was it? What's her name? Amy?
Yeah,
Amy,
I think it was
yeah.
All
Amy.
right,
And
Amy.
maybe also one last thing is like you will never go by yourself because you will meet friends, you will meet people, and they will
Yeah.
take you to the where the movement of party is. So
Yeah.
you won't be alone here.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that, I would just add that the city is so, as any city, has so many different places in it, right? I mean, you're talking about party and tourism,
Yeah.
but you and I were in a place in the city where we were walking and people said, you should not be here.
Yeah.
You can't be
Yeah.
here. You
Remember
need to
that?
leave.
Mhm.
In the middle of the day, two of us.
Yeah, we were
Right.
walking down along kind of on this bridge, and they just stopped us and
Mhm.
said, don't go down there."
Yeah.
Many homeless people, and I'm not saying that's unique to Bogota, but just to say, in a city,
That's
like
every
big city,
city.
you
Yeah.
never-
Yeah.
And it's different when you're a local because you know
You
where
know.
not to go.
and we did not know that.
Yeah, but if you're like a guest or like a tourist or just visiting, you're like less prevent
Mhm.
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
Like I don't care. I'm just walking. Like I
No,
don't care.
I'm always cautious here, with my cell phone, and when I pull it out, I'm always cautious. But
Mm.
There's,
but
can I
okay,
say
go
there's
ahead.
probably like a last question.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that's good.
As finishing this, we have had very long conversations with Julie and colleagues about safety, danger, security, how do you
Yeah.
know when you're
Mhm.
safe? And that's like you could do your whole
Yeah,
podcast
that's the
on
whole
it,
thing.
which would be really fun.
And I go by numbers. I look at the numbers in a population and the numbers of crimes that happen,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well,
You go by numbers. I go by chances.
Yeah.
yeah. For me, if it's a 1 in 1,000, but okay, whatever. I'm gonna walk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so here's maybe the last question. This
Mhm.
is Matt from Italy. What's the best dish in Colombia, and maybe one salty option and one sweet option in your answer?
Ooh, man.
I'm gonna have you answer that.
For me, they're all Peruvian dishes, actually.
So
Yeah.
I love that answer.
Yeah, then listen, no diss to the Colombians, but you got these Peruvian restaurants with all these mariscos and seafood and stuff. It's really
Mhm.
hard. But what's the soup that we have during the day that's always got the little piece of choclo and like
Ajiaco.
¿cómo
Ajiaco.
Ajiaco.
Ajiaco. With
Ajiaco.
J.
Yeah,
Ajiaco.
ajiaco.
Ecuador also have ajiaco.
Yeah.
Has ajiaco. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. That we have a lot of like traditional dishes. Like if you come here, you definitely taste like ajiaco. And in a sweet spot, I will say like oblea. Have you tasted oblea?
Yeah.
This cracker with sweet milk. It's a really tiny, big with arequipe. What do
Yeah.
you call that?
Arequipe.
Sweet milk.
Yeah. We
Uh,
had it one time. Yeah. Yeah.
That's definitely, but if you ask me, my top in the world is just white rice at home with a fried egg
Mm,
in the rice,
mm.
and just like a little bit of salt, and
Yeah.
so you have the, how do you call the yellow part of the egg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The yolk.
The yolk.
The yolk. So you don't have it too hard, like not too uncooked, so you can just like do this, and it just melt into the rice.
And then add a banana.
You will add a banana.
Yeah.
You will add a banana. I remember
Burrito.
we had that in
Yeah,
my
at your
hometown
house.
in
Yeah.
Armenia. That's
We have
like the
That
best.
was the standard dish in Ecuador, and we have that a lot for breakfast, Laurie
Yeah.
in particular. But there's
That's-
something about the rice. There's something,
and
yeah.
the egg,
and
and
the egg.
it's also a dish that you can taste like in those hateful classification of people in numbers here, like everywhere. Like you can eat
Everyone eats
rice
it.
and an egg. It tends to be like oh, they don't have anything else to eat, they're poor. But it's not like that. It's just like feel you connected to home,
Yeah.
to your mom, like to dinner at home
Yeah.
or something like that, or leftover from the day before, and then you add fried egg. Like
Yeah.
that's yummy.
Oye,
Yeah.
¿cómo se llama? How do you call the rice that's burnt on the bottom of
Y la
it?
pega, la pega.
La
Pega.
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 Yeah, la pega.
Yeah, that's
Pega
weird.
is to glue, to stick. So la pega is the rice that sticks to the bottom of the
It's
pan.
very, very crunchy,
Yeah.
salty.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that will be my best thing.
Yeah.
Like, but we have a lot of traditional food that it's also awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I must.
No,
No.
that's it.
Ah.
Well, Logan joined at around 4:17 and got a 3 out of 3 on the attendance.
Yeah, Logan, you killed it, man.
Okay, Logan, we believe you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, listen, why don't we cut here?
Yeah.
And I'll be back on Thursday by myself, maybe with Dr. Mulvey here, if she agrees. But I mean, we'll probably be out in the street somewhere, actually, not inside here. We stream, it'll be out somewhere in the streets. So
Good luck
yeah.
with that.
Until some thief on a bicycle comes by and like, boom, there goes the live stream.
With luck. With
Yeah.
luck. No, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, gracias. Okay,
Bye.
nos hablamos.